The offseason continues in the National Football League. We're here in Indianapolis for the 2025 NFL Combine. I'm Dominique Yates. I'm joined by Tom Silverstein. Spoon, we talked with Packers GM Brian Gutekunst this morning on this, what day is it, Tuesday morning?
I think it's Tuesday, yeah.
Yeah, right?
Yeah.
It's been a blur since going through the offseason up until now, but I guess what were some of your takeaways? He talked about injuries, some different roster moves. Just, what were some of your takeaways from Gutekunst today?
Yeah, I think my number one takeaway from it was kind of his response to what's happening with Jaire Alexander, which is that he plans on talking to his agent and working something out. And generally, when a guy says they're working something out, it might mean they're asking for a pay cut. And that's going to be interesting. Maybe it's a restructure, but I would guess that it's probably a pay cut. And then does Alexander want to do that or not? Now, Gutekunst said that he has not asked for a trade. So I think they're probably trying to smooth things out here. His agent is a quality guy who Gutekunst gets along with. So it'll be kind of interesting. They're going to be meeting here this week, and I'll be trying to throw a little, recorder there so maybe I can hear what they're talking about.
I think that's something that stood out to me with Gutekunst as far as with Jaire. He's talked about, he said there hasn't been a disconnect between the Packers and him. He said it all just kind of came down to injuries, and he had a lot of setbacks with that. So I think that's just an interesting dynamic when you look at it. But as far as not only him, with other injuries from out these players, including Christian Watson from Gutekunst, it seems like maybe some better news than even expected.
Yeah, they, as far as the surgery with Christian Watson, apparently it was clean, so there wasn't other ligament damage or cartilage, it sounded like. And Christian Watson, I suspect, is a guy who put, 900% into his rehab. But, he's just not a guy everyone has to accept he's not going to be there till late October, maybe mid-October, late October, maybe early November. And that's just the reality of it. What they kind of dodged was the injuries in the Eagles games, which all looked really bad. Elton Jenkins taking that helmet right in the shoulder. It was a stinger. He's over it, so according to Gutekunst. Romeo Doubs, he doesn't feel there's lasting effects with the concussions. Now, that's always something a guy you have to watch in the future. But as far as going into next year, it doesn't appear that that's going to be an issue. Jaden Reed came out of that okay. They decided he did not need surgery, but they're going to watch it and see how it heals and then determine at a later time whether there's some other action they need to take. But he was adamant that he would be ready for the next year. So they dodged, and Josh Myers, we know, ended up not being a very serious injury. So, yeah, I mean, they may not have been able to play, though, against the following week if they had won against the Eagles, but they'll at least be getting these guys back, it sounds like.
Yeah, sticking with kind of those wide receivers, you just talked about Watson, you talked about Reed, of course. Super Bowl week, there was a lot of talk when Josh Jacobs did media row, and he said that he felt that they need a proven number one receiver. There's been a lot of debate. There's been back and forth. Dontavian Wicks was on social media kind of laughing it off, if you will. Gutekunst, in his comments, it felt interesting, almost like he didn't seem very bothered by the comments that Josh made. So I guess, what were your kind of takeaways, maybe not only what Josh said, but what Gutekunst was saying and kind of referring to it?
I think, he, as he said it, it was said on social media, and he doesn't take too seriously what happens on social media. And he knows Josh Jacobs is right that they needed someone to step up and be their number one receiver, or a couple of guys. There were just way too many drops during the season. I thought it was interesting when asking him about the receiver position, he talked about competition. And I really believe they're going to bring in, now I'm not certain that it'll be veteran guys, but I think they'll bring in a lot of options. I think they'll draft several guys. And I think they do have to have competition. They have to have, guys start dropping passes. They got to be able to put them on the bench and say, we'll see you when you start catching passes. So I expect them to have a lot of receivers in camp. And, now is one of them going to be Devontae Adams or T. Higgins or something like that? Yeah, I don't know. But I definitely think there will be some new blood in that room.
Finally, is there anything in particular you're curious to see maybe over the next couple of days here? Maybe a college prospect that is going to be here, or maybe something from the Packers, from Gutekunst. Is there anything in particular you're curious about the next couple of days?
Yeah, I mean, this draft, it seems like Gutekunst has gotten pretty lucky. His needs have matched up with the draft. And, like 2 years ago, he got 2 tight ends out of it, and that was one of the strongest tight ends classes. Last year, offensive line was huge, and you got, Morgan out of that. I think this time, defensive line and edge are huge, huge numbers of them. So I'm interested to talk to some of those guys and see what their strengths are, and I think it'll be kind of like a smorgasbord for him. He's just got to pick the right ones. There's a lot of guys who end up being busts, but I think it'll be eye-opening to talk to some of them and find out, their stories.
One thing Gutekunst was kind of complimentary of, as far as like what if there is a strength in this class. Obviously, there's talk about Cam Ward, Shador Sanders, Travis Hunter, but he was very complimentary of the offensive and defensive lines that are kind of coming through the ranks right now. And I guess, again, it could kind of bode well for a team that's wanting to kind of build some things continually and add depth in the trenches. And so I guess when you look at for these Packers and Gutekunst and kind of how they will continually attack this, as far as with veterans or youth, do you have a sense of maybe what would be the best route if you could say in the front office for Green Bay?
Well, I think ideally they'd like to be a player in free agency, but it's not a real strong free agent class. I don't think they're going to get a Xavier McKinney or a Josh Jacobs out of this class. I think I think expectations are probably high that they're going to make a splash, and I think it might end up being 2 or 3 guys who, are mid-level free agents. Now, the wild card is all these guys who are asking for trades, the Myles Garretts, Trey Hendricksons. I mean, it just goes, Deebo Samuel. There's all kinds of guys who seem to want to get out, but that requires giving up picks. I think what we could see are some somewhat viable players getting cut, and that might be, the second or third phase of free agency where he makes, some moves. So I don't expect a big splash.
Makes sense. And obviously there'll be a lot to kind of keep an eye out on for the next, not only this week, but for the next couple of weeks leading up to the NFL draft in April. But right now we're here in the NFL Combine. After we talk with Brian Gutekunst, we'll talk with some different players throughout this week. We'll have drills. There'll be so much more that'll be going on here in Indianapolis, and we'll keep you up to date. For Tom Silverstein, I'm Dominique Yates.